chairs. We got the right number of chairs. So
that music, it sounded like we were staging an invasion here at Weston.
good.
Before we get started, I just wanted to start by thanking my colleagues, Chris Coburn, Ann Klebansky, Greg Meyer, and Keith Dreyer, and many others for organizing such a terrific conference, and want to welcome all of you to it. This panel, I think, is going to be a real treat, not because of my moderation, but because of who the panelists are. We're fortunate to have some of the leaders in the healthcare industry with us from global companies that I think can share a lot of local, U.S. and international perspectives on this topic. I believe that in healthcare we are simultaneously going through three revolutions. There's a biologic revolution, there's a digital one, and last but not least, there's, at least here in the US, a revolution in the way that care is delivered and paid for. And I think one of the most exciting aspects of being involved in healthcare is living through all those three revolutions simultaneously, but it also is a pretty daunting and at times a disorienting and frustrating revolution because so much change is happening at once. And certainly within each organization within healthcare, we are amassing increasing amounts of data. Healthcare is very fragmented, patients, providers, lots of people are frustrated with the healthcare system, and along comes this new technology out of the digital space called AI, which I think lots of people hope will make healthcare more approachable by patients, more understandable, more satisfying for providers, and help lead to improvements in the quality, the efficiency, and the outcomes of healthcare. That's certainly the dream. So like I said, we're fortunate to have some great panelists who are going to comment on those topics and bring to bear the perspectives on the impact that AI is likely to have on their companies and on the healthcare industry, and also their vision for this field as well. So to my immediate left is Terri Bresenham, who is the Chief Innovation Officer for GE Healthcare. To her left is Frans van Houten, the CEO of Philips Healthcare. Next to him is Jeff Leiden, CEO of Vertex Pharmaceuticals here in Boston. And next to him is Bernd Montag, the CEO of Siemens. So I'm going to start out with a softball right down the middle of the plate. We like to talk about baseball here in Boston at this moment in time. And so I guess the question I'd like to ask each of you to address is, how do you think AI is going to affect your company and the healthcare industry overall?
So I'll start I think in a broader context, there's a lot of people in the world that don't have access to care. So if we look at that as access to quality care, so maybe 5 billion plus people. So AI clearly has an opportunity to extend the healthcare system and access to care in a very different way to a large number of people. The other, of course, is healthcare costs, and we know that no one's happy with the cost of care, whether you're here or whether you're across other parts of the world. So I think those two things on their own are big targets of how do we change fundamentally either the access to care, quality care, or to the cost structure. Is healthcare, we all know it's a very fragmented, complex workflow. It also, patients arrive with multiple variables themselves, and then the technology pace of change in healthcare is pretty rapid. Those three things combined make you very interested in AI as a way to augment your capabilities to find different ways or different insights in making improvements in the delivery of care. So when we think about that in the business that we are a part of, we are looking at this across the kind of wingspan that we have, which is the diagnostics, risk identification, the interventions and therapies that we have with our life sciences business in particular, and then the ability to monitor patients on an ongoing basis. If we were to look at that in a different way, whether more interconnectedness or whether there's more precision in each of those steps, I think it's not far-fetched to think there is a more precise healthcare system out there for all of us. And that really excites us in one sense, but it certainly makes for a lot of internal debate about what is the right way to disrupt that, what are the right ways to come at that. And we certainly have been working in this space for quite a while. As a company, as GE, we have made a long-term investment in this cognitive engine called Predicts, which is using a lot of the machine learning and AI capabilities to apply what I would say to more operational outcomes of business models. But we're very bullish. I mean, I think that there's no doubt that this will be by far the most transformational technology change that's going to occur, again, in concert with some other very important changes in genomics and genetics and biotherapies, as well as diagnostics and imaging technology.
Great. Frans?
Philips has made a pivot to focus entirely on health and healthcare. And in choosing the domain where we want to excel, we have said consciously, let's not be just focused on one department, but focus on the whole patient journey. From being healthy to falling sick, being diagnosed, treated, and then supported with chronic disease, and then hopefully recovering to a healthy life cycle. So what I describe as a continuum is opposite to your introduction of a fragmented world, right? So we need to tear down the silos in the way the patient is put at the center and supported in a continuous way. And maybe this is also where we can address the frustration of doctors and nurses to make systems really support the patient journey and seamless care focused on precision and productivity. So in Philips, we have realized that just having great medical devices is not enough. We need to connect them, we need to make them interoperable, we need to unlock the data and make that data actionable. Transforming the company around a digital future started 6-7 years ago, where today 60% of our 1.8 billion in research and development is actually in software, and we have already over 500 data scientists in order to unlock the power of that data. And we are making progress. I think data applications can greatly give insight in variance, in raising the standard towards best practice, can avoid mistakes. Data science can help come to a precision diagnosis where we correlate and integrate the worlds of radiology, pathology, and genomics, and then link it to predictive treatment pathways that have the best chance to succeed given this patient, this genome, this mutation. We apply data science in patient safety and patient monitoring. It's actually possible to predict whether a patient will have cardiac arrest, to predict whether sepsis breakout will happen. So we all need to adopt massively this world of data and data analytics. And AI will not be a standalone thing. It will be embedded in the workflow at the point of care. And we as an industry, we have to make sure that it is adaptive to the practice of healthcare rather than distractive to the profession of healthcare. So we prefer to talk about adaptive intelligence rather than just artificial intelligence. But it's going to be big. In fact, it is right there already.
Great. Jeff?
So I think, Peter, at the risk of oversimplifying it, I think all of our challenge in healthcare is to get the right treatment to the right patient at the right time, and obviously in the most cost-efficient way possible. That's what we're all here trying to do, and it's an enormous challenge. We see AI as a way of managing information and gaining new insights that will allow you to do that across that entire value chain. I give you maybe two examples from two different hats that I wear. At Vertex, we're developing transformational drugs. The challenge is that most drugs fail for one of two reasons. You're either hitting the wrong target, so you're not treating the disease that you thought you were going to be treating, or you're hitting the right target and you have an unexpected safety signal. That's the reason 80% of drugs fail during development. So we can use AI to help address that problem in a couple of different ways. On the efficacy side, we can interrogate genomic databases. And by the way, we don't have to do the sequencing. The sequencing's already been done. The database is already there. They do need to be pulled together and annotated properly. But we can use AI to interrogate those sequences and get a much, much better idea of the right target to hit from an efficacy standpoint, and probably increase that predictive accuracy by 5 or 10-fold over what we've done previously, even from animal experiments. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of one side of the picture. On the other side of the picture, I'm the chairman of a little AI pathology company called Path AI, and they're using AI. I think you guys know
We
them
work
well.
with
We work
them,
together.
yes. Yeah.
They're using AI to look at slides essentially and have a machine look at the slides and ask, how much can we help a pathologist come to the right diagnosis? And the answer is a lot. So when pathologists are reading 82 or 85% of the time accurately, which is a sort of scary number, they can read at 99% accuracy, at least in certain instances in certain tumors. And that's really important because that is then getting the right treatment to the right patient, and obviously they can do it a lot cheaper and a lot faster. So it's looking across that spectrum and asking where can this information management tool help you deliver care better and more efficiently.
Great. Bernd?
Okay, yeah, thank you. I mean, for Siemens Healthineers, I mean, the company which IPO'd a month ago, I mean, one way to look at us is that we are the decision-making company in healthcare. Yeah? So we have more than 70% of all critical medical decisions depend on technologies which we have in the portfolio. So you can look at us as the GPS of healthcare, so we can characterize the patient. We are critical for making the next step. And every hour, more than 240,000 patients are touched by our system. Yeah, so, or by systems which we have delivered. And what AI does is really fundamentally changing many, many aspects. It starts with kind of trivial things from preventive maintenance to automated patient positioning based on and taking out errors out of the procedure. It helps doing incidental findings which are overseen in the emergency room. But it's also there for moonshot projects like a very cool digital twin project for a lifelong accompanying data collection, which we are working on. So the ultimate dream we have is that with every patient episode, and one quote I really like is that every patient episode in healthcare has a tiny bit of research in it. Yeah? That with every patient episode, the whole system gets better, and that the other 240,000 episodes benefit from this. This is the long-term vision we have, and AI is the key enabler for that.
I guess going from 50,000 feet down to maybe 10 or 20, I'd be interested in each of you maybe mentioning one AI initiative going on within your organization that you're most bullish, most excited about, that you're either working on or is currently being used today.
The one topic, I mean, I described, I mean, this digital twin project, which is a kind of moonshot project, yeah. But I think it's not a single topic. It is really about changing how we do things. I think what Jensen said today, data is the new source code. Yeah? So we are building up a huge data lake. We are annotating data in order to create that raw data or the source code. We have the data center and so on. And we are changing how we do things. And I think this transformative nature in everything we do is more exciting than any particular project. Yeah? It is just wonderful to see how it changes
everything,
many, many aspects. Yeah?
Yeah, maybe I'll give you two really quick ones. One on the drug discovery side, where one of the things that we've noticed as we've developed transformative medicines for patients with cystic fibrosis is there are some patients with what should be very severe mutations who are not very ill. And so rather than getting sick at age 10, they're not getting sick till 50 or 60, and yet they have exactly the same genotype, or at least within the CFTR gene, the same genotype. That's obviously a very interesting experiment of nature. We can go in using AI and interrogate their genomes for modifier genes, because they must, by definition, have a modifier gene that's making their disease less severe. And in fact, when we do that, we can find modifier genes, and those are new drug targets. So that's one half. You know, the other thing that I think that's been very interesting to me, we have a group of about 15 or 17 people who are full-time AI folks within Vertex, And they came about a year ago and said, look, we're working a lot on R&D, but we can solve a lot of other problems around the company if you let us walk around and see what the problems are. And they did that. And so one of the things that they've been working on the last 6 months is we hire about 400 people, 500 people a year at Vertex. We have 30,000 applicants for those jobs. And we actually have a reasonably high failure rate within the first 1 or 2 years after hire, people who leave. So we wanted to know, well, how can we do better at that? So they analyzed the data from 5 or 10 years worth of that hiring practices and asked what predicts success or what predicts failure. Just give you one simple example, which is pretty striking. The time between the time we make an offer to a candidate and the time they accept that offer, that time is highly predictive of who's going to succeed or not. The quicker they say yes, the more likely they're going to succeed. And beyond a certain point, there's less than a 10% chance they're going to succeed. That's an insight I never would have
So do you withdraw offers now?
Yeah, no, we do. We actually have a deadline now in our own minds, and if someone goes beyond that deadline, it's very unlikely they're going to be successful. So it's, that's a different business problem, but an interesting one.
At Philips, many of our propositions embed artificial intelligence, so it's difficult to choose, what is your favorite child, but maybe where we have most impact is where you touch most patients. So in our sleep and respiratory care business, we have 1 million sleep patients that are connected through their CPAP machine to our cloud, and they are monitored every night in real time, where we take all the data on how the machine is used, what the quality of the sleep is, and obviously it is a smart algorithm that's built on the basis of 2.5 billion sleep nights that interprets this, because no human can follow 1 million patients. And in the morning, we give coaching and feedback to the patient. We also use the data, obviously with the consent of the patient, to demonstrate compliance so that the payer can pay and provide feedback to the doctor. Now, all of this also came on the back of competitive bidding, which put pressure on the reimbursement rate, causing a need to make the whole ecosystem of care much more efficient. So I think we have gotten a breakthrough through this connectivity and AI applications that is better for the patient, but it is also more productive for society, and that's pretty cool. Another one that I feel really excited about is how our performance bridge can optimize entire enterprises when it comes to the utilization of assets, for example, in radiology, but not just in utilization, but also, the quality of technician, the variance of utilization, setting up the patients right, the predictive care. And I dare say you can get to 20–30% of efficiency gains if you approach this holistically.
I think at G, while this may not sound as glamorous as a clinical application, but one that we feel very strong about is the idea that you can change the operational efficiency of a health system. And in a partnership with Hopkins, we started with this. We took the data out of 14 different existing IT systems that were in there across their network and started to look at the data and understand ways in which you could change patient workflow, ways that you could enhance the asset utilization or efficiency, improve the resource deployment within their network. And it's been remarkable, actually. In fact, I would say as we do this, it's now got a whole wall of analytics in a command center, and the changes in the way patient care is affected is not only important in terms of the experience for a patient, but it's also extremely important, obviously, for the bottom line. So being able to move people through surgery to the recovery room, dramatically faster, being able to have the right resources and predict now out 2 or 3 weeks whether they're going to have a bottleneck in a certain department or a certain interconnectedness within their system is really important in terms of creating lower costs of care or more effective, standards of care. So I think that's one that we feel surprised in a way at how fruitful that application to an ongoing learning process and continue to add kind of tiles to this wall of analytics that will make their system even more. And we're expanding that now to others. On a clinical level, one that's also very exciting is going back and looking at a little bit what Jeff said, is looking at the patient population on drugs that maybe weren't in the clinical trial a success. So in the case of Alzheimer's, we're actually going back and looking at using AI at populations of why certain people responded and others didn't, and resurfacing, in fact, some of the molecules that are out there. And that looks very promising, that we know that clinical trials take an average of $1 billion in 10 years and a 90% failure rate. So anything that we can do to improve people's pipelines of drug discovery, and furthermore, these biologics, which are expensive, to make sure they're more targeted. So again, the right treatment for the right patient at the right time.
You've all talked about, where you see AI going within the industry, within healthcare, and some of the things you're doing to advance it. I was curious, what's the biggest obstacle you're facing to advancing AI within your organization strategically? Is it access to people who can know how to use these algorithms? Is it regulatory constraints, concerns about liability, access to data that's not of sufficiently high quality? What holds you back from pushing on this lever even harder?
I think you've already mentioned several hurdles. They're not the same everywhere, but I would put with star on number one, good quality curated data, right? Because there's plenty of data around, but most of it is not well curated and therefore can create a bias in the creation of good AI algorithms. That is one. Now, how to get to good curated data? I mean, many of us store masses of data, but that's not our data, right? So we don't own that data. We are the custodian of that data. To get the right authority on the data is also an issue. If you look at Europe, then privacy laws have gone a bit too far, right? Where even in Germany, from one German state to the next German state, you need to get a rescan because you cannot take your data along. It's kind of silly. And if you oppose that to China, where they build huge data lakes with much less regard for the patient privacy, it's easy to see which region will get ahead in the game of having curated data sets and therefore lead in AI. I would expect that China is going to make a big splash.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with Frans. I think it's the data that's the number one roadblock. I think there are regulatory challenges, particularly as we get closer to patients, and there should be regulatory challenges. And I think the FDA, as an example, is just trying to figure this out with companies. They're very open to it and very willing to discuss it. But there's some thorny issues around how this will be regulated and how it can be used, and that's something all of us have to work together on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one way to look at it is AI can make things which are currently happening and are done by humans much faster and much more error-free and so on and so on. That's one version of AI. But the real frontier is when AI does things which are not done today. Mm-hmm. Yeah? So it's not just automating and making better what is done already. And there lies a little bit of a challenge, because data only exists, and curated data only exist on things which are done already. Yeah? I mean, you can get your pancreatic CT images and so on and so on. Yeah? I think the challenge for the real promise of AI, when it's about really precision medicine and bringing data together about, from the lab and from the EMR and from imaging and from wherever, and comparing patient history, there is no data source yet.
Right.
Yeah? And basically, we have to create that data source to then apply AI on. Yeah? And I think what we are currently solving is super important on the one hand, because we are doing what has been done better by using AI. But the real future is doing things which are not doable today. Yeah? And the collection of these data will be interesting, because they come from many different sources.
Mm-hmm.
might come at it a little differently in that I think one of our problems is there's so many things that you could do. So it's a little bit of where do you find the best places and the focus around that. But that actually has led us to this partnership with NVIDIA, where we're embedding their GPU into our devices. And the idea behind this is that not only the new products that go out the door, but our install-based devices can become more intelligent. And people on their own can, be a part of this revolution, if you will, on improving the diagnostic capabilities of the machinery that's already out there. So it's been an exciting partnership, and I think will open the door to many more collaborators in this world. And I think that's another part of AI, at least in healthcare, is it is never going to be done by one entity or one organization. It's going to be a series of partnerships and collaborators that will come up with the most impactful, I think, differences.
I actually agree with you. I mean, we will see a fragmentation of the world before we will see a concentration, right? And there will be many pockets of excellence in the world where people do great things. Yeah. And then somehow we have to bring it, as big companies, we have to bring it together on a platform that it is, safe to use and can be applied in clinical use. But.
You're all leaders in companies that do business around the world. And I'm curious, given that international perspective, if you could comment on where the U.S. is in terms of applying AI in healthcare more globally. And if we're not leading the world, where do you see our biggest shortcoming being?
I think the U.S. is at the forefront. Right? I mentioned China because they're making a huge effort to catch up. And they see that as a real opportunity. But the US is ahead of Europe, and that is primarily because Europe is so schizophrenic around the use of data.
Yeah. But maybe as I comment, I think on the one hand, there is the big, as Frans says, there's the big advantage of a homogeneous big market. Yeah? The US is a huge population for German standards, yeah? Or for a European standard, and there's China with a homogeneous market. I think the US there is more IT savviness in things coming from a consumer angle. What might be interesting is because currently there's in Germany the Hannover Messe, yeah, which is an industry fair, trade show, yeah, which is pretty important. Yeah? And it's interesting that Europe is, when it comes to the Internet of Things, yeah, this Industry 4.0, is actually gaining ground. Yeah? So I think the question will be, what is when it comes to Internet of Things type of technology, I think there is a certain strength in Europe, in European culture, when it comes to adopting novel IT, software, digital AI capabilities and possibilities. There is more openness in the US just from a cultural point of view, I believe. Yeah.
I actually think the international emerging markets are actually a super exciting area for what I see, largely because they don't have a lot of the embedded infrastructure as we do here. So there's not as much to have to unwind to try a different approach. And you couple that with a lack of expertise or lack of doctors in infrastructure. So for example, we've tried some different projects where, pulling signals out of remote mobile devices, having those go to the cloud, applying AI on those, and giving an answer back within a very short cycle, 30 seconds, 3 minutes at max. I think these are ways that the practice of healthcare is already different there. The cost constraints and the resource constraints are a driver for innovating a different approach. And you have massive populations. So the ability for us to take a lot of data in rapidly and then continuously learn upon that, while they don't have the expertise per se at the level we do here in the US, there's a different dynamic on the clinical side that I would say lends itself to being an innovative platform for a lot of us.
Mm-hmm. One of the things people in senior leadership need to decide is how to organize the company in order to pursue an opportunity like AI creates. And so I'm curious, in your organization, have you created a separate AI function separate from the existing business units, or have you embedded people with AI expertise, sprinkled them across the business units? How have you gone about that? And I mentioned this is a question that came from somebody in the audience. I would encourage anyone else with questions to please use the app to submit.
It's a very relevant question and not an easy one to answer. I mean, companies like hospitals need to bring together many functional expertise and bring it to bear, right? And historically, a company like Philips, and I'm sure for GE and Siemens similar, you organize around ultrasound and CT and patient monitoring. But actually, you know, back to my earlier statement that we need to be patient-centric and tear down silos means that we need to deeply understand, you know, cardiovascular pathways and respiratory pathways and integrate alongside. And therefore, we need to become platform companies rather than product companies. So we have made a shift to start to standardize platforms, the interoperability, the cybersecurity, not allowing every business unit to set their own standard. Everybody needs to have the same quality management system because now we put products together and that together they become a system rather than a standalone product. And data and user interfaces need to go across that platform. So we see a world where business units will have less independence, where the CIO, the CTO, I mean your role, has a much bigger say in what's going on in the company. And indeed, at Philips, a large part of the data scientists are in a centrally led group, but placed in the different locations where our businesses are. But we don't want to fragment it because then we fear that we will create a patchwork.
Interesting. Yeah,
we've taken a somewhat similar approach, although there are two challenges here, I think, that at least that we've discovered. One, exactly as you said, that our experience is if you simply scatter it around the company, what you get is a lack of a collaborative, centralized expertise, and you get a real lack of prioritization of products. Part of this is an asset allocation question. Mm-hmm. Where are you going to put these valuable assets? Because these people are pretty valuable. About 10 years ago, we created a robotics group at Vertex, and we decided to centralize it, and they roamed the company using robotic solutions for a whole variety of problems. Incredibly successful, and we assigned assets or resources every year on a prioritized project list so that we knew centrally what they were doing. But then, of course, there's the problem of getting people to talk the same language in the business unit and the AI unit. And in our experience, folks in AI talk a different language. So when they get together with the business folks, there's a lot of confusion about what it is they're actually trying to accomplish. So we have a centralized unit, we have a prioritized set of projects each year, and then we have teams that actually go and live in that business unit when they're trying to solve this problem. We actually have people that we call translators who can speak the language of AI. They're not necessarily programmers and can speak the language of the business to help translate. Yeah, it's cool. From French to German.
Yeah, in our case, I mean, I'd like to make a little bit more of a point for federalism. Yeah, I mean, we have, you know, when it comes to the competencies, we have a very strong group, led by Dorin Komanicu, who will be also on one of these panels here, who is, you know, building the infrastructure, the supercomputer, the data lake, and so on and so on. But I think the real strength we need to bring to the table is that we need to combine this skill set with the domain knowledge in the organization. Yeah, because what I described in the beginning, we want to AI-ize all what we are doing. Mm-hmm. And when we have the AI competencies too centralized, we can do that. Yeah? Then we can also work with a third party. Yeah? So this mixture of having a strong competence center, which on the other hand is very deeply connected with where the federal innovation happens, is for us the recipe of success.
It sounds similar. Yeah.
I think we have a centralized group at the corporate level, which is, again, serving all of our businesses on the idea of a digital twin and a cognitive engine platform. And I think the platforming of AI across any industry is probably one that has some merit to do that. But as Frans and actually Bernd said, you also have people embedded in your different groups who are creating the domain expertise around, what do you think about when you look at your problem that you're trying to solve. But I think, as Jensen actually said earlier today, it's important for all of us to become data scientists or fluent enough in data science to understand, because it's going to pervade every aspect of what we do. And unless we're more contemporary in the way we think, that we're at risk of creating things that are obsolete.
Mm-hmm. Another important function of senior management is to make decisions about what the organization is going to do. And I'm curious, what business case do you require to approve AI initiatives? Do you just assume it's a good thing given all the hype and promise, or do you, what kind of business case do you require in order to give something the green light within your organization?
I mean,
Bernd?
I think there's two different aspects. One is really there is a deeply integrated version of AI, which does not have a separate business case. Yeah? When you build a CT scanner which is automatically applying the right dose because it recognizes the shape of the patient, this is not a separate business case. Yeah? It is an exciting feature, like when you build in automatic parking in your car. Yeah? So there's no separate business case. But then there is research work where we look at standalone AI-powered things, like clinical decision-making tools and so on and so on. And this we treat more as a research topic. They say this is something we fund, and it's also okay when there is more uncertainty around the business model. Yeah? And this is also what brought us to a relatively strong position in AI, that people played with this early on without a business case.
Similar for Philips, as what Bernd describes, I would add that we always mandate a thought-leading customer to join the effort, just to avoid that we get off track.
An interesting question from the audience, and three of you are device manufacturers. I think it's related to you. How does your company plan to handle different data regulatory laws? Will the data centers that power smart scanners have to be isolated by country if the regulations are different in various countries?
Well, I think they will have to follow the standards within the countries that we operate. That's what we have to do for many other aspects, in fact, of our devices. I do think that it is I don't envy, for example, whether it's the FDA or the CMEF in China. I don't envy them in trying to figure out how they're going to manage to put in place frameworks that will work to protect the safety of patients, but also enable advancements and take advantage of the AI kind of tools. But that being said, I think we are trying, in fact, we work very closely with with the other vendors in a market to try to sit down and see if we can help shape this so that it is, trying to keep the balance between what is a scary proposition if you've been managing to regulate on very conventional models, to something that has a lot more of a black box in their minds. I mean, they don't understand it. It is hard for them to appreciate how you're doing it. And even inside, we have neural nets that are checking neural nets to see that the algorithm is right. It's not just, a correlation, but it's actual causal. We can understand how that algorithm works. So even for us inside, how do you validate the algorithms that you're doing? I think that's something that does cause a lot of concern for the regulatory bodies. And because of that, it's going to be lagging, I think, in the advancements of what we can do. But that being said, there probably isn't another example like this that some point they keep moving forward or get closer to where you want them. I don't believe that this will be different. It may just take a little longer in some cases. But I think the data privacy one is maybe more problematic, because algorithms that are developed in one part of the world, if that data is considered sovereign, you're not able to move that out. That may be something that will shift where innovation happens. And I think that's another concern even for us in the US is if the walls are too high, innovation is going to happen elsewhere.
Yeah. I mean, we manage 30 petabyte of data, of medical data. And most of it is country bound because of the legislation. But beyond country legislation, most hospital systems hang on to the data on premise, right? Even though that may not be the best solution.
I've never heard of that.
So speaking about most optimal data architectures, a lot of water has to stream through the river before we get to real cloud solutions. And I do think we need to get to a breakthrough. I mean, we entrust our financial health to the cloud. We do cross-country transfers as if it is nothing. Yet when it comes to healthcare, we are overly stressed out. And clearly, patient care can greatly benefit if cross-enterprise, I mean, for example, emergency response services and a tertiary hospital and the primary care can all work together with a cloud coordination layer that is, the care coordination layer that is hosted in the cloud. That would be highly beneficial. Right? I think many lives will be saved. It can be more convenient, like we also like to order everything online. So we need to get there, and I think it will require more dialogue for especially also politicians to accept.
Maybe two comments, Peter. One is going forward, how are we going to do this? But remember, there are massive backward data sets for which we as a group in industry don't have permission to actually use them for this. So that's in a way a wasted resource. There are literally millions of patient records and phenotypes, and that is very difficult to access because they weren't consented at that time. That's one problem that we sort of need to deal with. And then moving forward, how are we going to make sure that we have consent to use the data for all the things that all of us want to do? That, and that is patient data. They do need a consent. The other part from a regulatory standpoint is this is the kind of stuff that actually makes regulators very nervous, because what's really happening is you're taking data, you're putting into a black box that you can't really explain. The machine is learning an algorithm that you can't really understand, and a result is popping out the other direction. And all you can validate it on is how good was that result. You actually can't explain what went on in that black box, and that makes regulators very, very nervous.
Right.
I mean, one potentially philosophical remark. I mean, we are sitting here as basically the three, not you, basically there are three sizable companies building, for example, MRI for one planet with 7 billion inhabitants. Yeah, so it needs, because this is still a village. Yeah, so I think the world MR market is, 4,000 units or so. And if there were different regulations in every country, or if every country would require the magnet needs to be built in Turkey, yeah, or I don't know what, the software has to be tested in Malaysia, MRI wouldn't exist. Yeah, and there is a scale game. Yeah, it's not that we are evil guys buying all other companies. Yeah, it needs, in order to sustain a magnet development, a great, sequence development, all kind of stuff. Yeah, you need scale, and the same is true in AI. And I think what the regulators will understand after a while is that when you have different regulations, whether from a regulatory point of view or from a data privacy point of view in every country, in the end, your country will be excluded from innovation.
I think that's very true.
And this is also what's happening in Europe. I mean, I recently talked to the EU Commissioner Oettinger, yeah? I mean, they are trying to create one European digital market, yeah, because they understand if we have 28 different markets in Europe, we will not be, or Europe will not be competitive. Right. And I think that will also help on
but healthcare is excluded from that effort, huh, Bernd?
Yeah, but we need to work on that.
We need to work on that.
But there's a carrot too, right? Because the flip side is AI will definitely democratize healthcare. It'll take it to places that simply don't have healthcare today. So there's a very strong carrot for those countries to go along and do it because they won't have access to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. But we only have a few minutes left, and so maybe I'll ask each of you to make any, raise any issue or make any final comment you'd like at this point. Terri?
Well, listen, I think I'll start where I end, or I'll end where I started, which is the idea that, you know, there's more than 5 billion people in the world that lack access to quality care. And this is one way for us to fundamentally change the access curve and provide quality, healthy lives for more people in the world. And I don't say that in an altruistic way. I mean that in the sense that this is a technology shift that will help us be able to really fundamentally do that. The other is, I think, if we think about the longer tail of AI, we're talking a lot today about what gets disrupted or changed in the short term. I think ultimately this will give us a longer term view, which is the consumer or patient will be much more in charge of their health and their decisions around their health. And I think, you know, in some ways, having spent the last 6 years in India, I can see that already because they have a very consumer-driven healthcare system already. And it will probably be the first market, in fact, that will go all the way with AI, and the patient's decision support system is right in their cell phone. And I think that's a really exciting, but also somewhat disturbing model in the ways that we think about our business model. But at the end of the day, I think our whole purpose of what we're trying to do is to improve the quality of care and the precision of the decisions and the application of the therapies at the right place at the right time. That idea around precision health and that pathway that connects all of these things that we just talked about. But we must make sure we're empowering people with this information, not overpowering them. And I think there's a risk here that AI could be overpowering people in a way that's not healthy. So I think let's think about how do we make that work in the right way for patients as well as the care providers.
Right.
I mean, let's have an optimistic view here. AI is basically packaging knowledge in an appropriate way and can unleash, therefore, better care, more access, and everything. So knowledge resides in everybody here in the room. You're all knowledge carriers. Partners Network has enough scale, I mean, to borrow from Bernd on the scale issue, has enough scale and a big enough population to actually have a meaningful cohort to develop algorithms on. And earlier I said, you know, AI will first fragmentize before it will, let's say, consolidate.
Right.
And I think there's an opportunity here for this region, I mean, could be other regions, but let's stay close to home here in Boston, to leverage the smartness of the physicians, many who are involved in research, the large data set that Massachusetts has, the captive patient base that you have. I think we should start here to make sure that develops into a rich landscape of AI applications that really advance healthcare.
Well, we're certainly trying.
You know, as I look around the healthcare landscape, there are very few tools that can improve the quality of care, improve access to care, and decrease the cost of care all at the same time. This is one of them. This is probably the prime one. And so that's why I think there's so much excitement about it. And thank you for building up Massachusetts and Boston. I co-chair
our North American headquarters, Cambridge.
And I agree with you. I think there's a huge opportunity for this region to be a leader.
Yeah. And Bernd, you'll get the last question.
Yeah, I mean, one remark, I mean, probably everybody in the room is familiar with the hype cycle. Yeah. And maybe, and I mean, I was curious to hear in the previous panel about, you know, when the comparison to the .com hype. Yeah? And when we look back 20 years ago, we didn't know how great the internet would be, but still the bubble was bursting. Yeah. So, and I think what we should be conscious about is that there will be this moment with AI also, yeah, where we find out, wow, it is harder than we thought. But this is where the fun starts. Yeah, and I think this is what I think we need to be conscious about, yeah, that yes, there are some quick wins, but the real big benefits for healthcare will take time. And I think we all need this energy to live through the hype cycle. And that's what will make the difference in the long run. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, on that note, please help me thank Terri, Frans, Jeff, and Bernd for a terrific conversation on this topic.